So in discussing the meaning of life, the purpose of our existence, the Talmud has a very simple formula. The Talmud, which is the compendium of Jewish wisdom from a couple of thousand years ago, says very simply that a person should say 3 words in Hebrew. Bishvili nivra ha'olam, which means the world was created for me. So in other words, the Talmud is saying that if you're wondering why the world was created, what's the purpose of creation, why this vast universe was created by God, the answer, you need look no further than yourself. Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for myself. Every person should say this. The Talmud says that's why God created Adam as an individual. Rather than creating an entire nation of people, He created one individual to teach you that one individual is the purpose of creation. And if you're wondering which individual that is, it's you. And therefore you should get in the habit of saying, the world was created for me. That's the advice of the Talmud. So if you're searching for the meaning and the purpose, why this vast plan came about, so you found it. It's you. The world was created for you. So what type of person will be produced by that philosophy? If you indeed espouse this one, try it. Let's say for the next week, couple of weeks, go around reminding yourself the world was created for me. Any problems there?
No pressure.
No pressure?
Nice and narcissistic.
Complete narcissism, self-centeredness to the extreme. It's one thing somebody thinking, like, my life is just about me. This is saying much more than that. It's not just my life, yours too. The entire universe. It's all there for me to serve me as like a silver platter there for me to utilize. It's all for me. So only self-centeredness could come from this. Anything else?
That's it, no pressure. Which means like the whole kind of, you're responsible for the world, like in the words of what's his name, that French, we're responsible for what we looking after, kind of thing. Saint-Exupéry, like.
Okay, so you could look at it differently. You could look at it as a statement of responsibility. The whole world was created for you, so what are you doing about that? Are you looking after it? It's yours, it's there for you, so are you doing what needs to be done? What was that?
There's other me in the world, other than me.
Right.
It doesn't fit.
Right, there's a bit of a problem here. If I'm going around saying the world was created for me, that's nice, but what about the guy next to me? And that person over there, they're also saying it. We can't both be right. Either I'm the center of the universe or you are. But we can't both be the center of the universe.
Well, it's all about sharing. We can't really share.
The what?
We can't really share all the universe.
Right. So if it's all for me, it's not for you. I mean, it's a zero-sum game. There's only one of us can be the purpose of creation. And so this Talmudic statement, apart from being a strange moral lesson to go around saying the world was created for me, I'm the purpose of creation. Apart from that, it seems like an impossible thing. Let's say you do believe it, but everyone else, if they're also supposed to believe that, so then it's contradictory. Is the world for me or for you? Who is it all for? My attitude is going to contradict yours. We can't all be the reason for creation. So what's it saying? The best we've come up with is that maybe it's telling you that you should be responsible for all creation. But even then, I'll say, well, I am. Aren't other people also responsible for just me? The world was created just for me. Is there no one else that has any input into this creation? And if I'm saying it, and everyone's supposed to say this, So then that waters down the responsibility. I'm not all that responsible. Because I know I'm supposed to say that the world was created for me, but so are you, and so is that person, and everyone's supposed to say this, and so we're all responsible, really.
That saying doesn't eliminate other people. It doesn't say it's just for you. It's created for me, but it can also be created for other people as well.
Well, then what does it mean?
But it means
The world was created for
other-
us, for all of us.
No, by saying it means personal responsibility. That applies to everybody.
But then the phrase would have to be different. It would have to say the world was created for us, or a part of the world was created for me.
No, I don't agree with you.
How can you say the world, the universe, everything was created for me, but not just me? If it doesn't say that.
Well, because
Created for me. You can have a bus that was for me, but it's also for other people as well that live in the area.
So then it's not. You can't say it's created for me, it's created for us. For all of us.
Well, that's another way of putting it.
Yeah, but
But if
I
you want to be responsible, it was made for you. It was created for you. And you, and you.
Oh,
You're all responsible.
but there's an and then.
Yeah.
No, but I see it from the way that the Talmud says this, right? So we can't then speak directly to the Talmud and have a discussion with them, him or it. But we can have an understanding that we're not the only person reading the Talmud, and therefore it must be on a multiple level, but also on a singular level.
Okay, so in other words, we're going to have to qualify this statement that when it says the world was created for me, what it means is that when I'm talking to you, it's to you. But it's also for
Whoever's
others.
reading it.
But
pretty
whoever's
much.
reading it should take it personally.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's not really that the world was created for you. It's that you should see things, as far as you're concerned, as if the world was created for you and you're therefore responsible for everything. But somebody else has to also see it that way.
Yeah, but I don't know why that means that it's not really.
Well, because it wasn't really just created for you. Like, at the end of the day, you're not really the only one responsible for all of creation. It's just a good way of looking at things. In other words, rather than the normal way of looking at things, and that is that, well, there's plenty of people out there, somebody else is going to look after the world. I don't have to be the one to do it. That's the normal way of looking at things. This is turning around and saying, no, you have to see it as if you're the last person that the world is dependent upon. And so you should see it as your responsibility. Even though, in actual fact, there are other people who also should be seeing things like this. But the right way of looking at it is as if you're the last one. As if it's all for you. As if you're responsible. Okay? That is definitely one valid interpretation of it. That when it says the world was created for me and I should engender this as a part of my world outlook, the world was created for me, it's not talking about somebody else, it's talking about me. I have to be responsible for the universe. That is one way of looking at it. There's another way of looking at it, a deeper way of looking at this statement from the point of view of the Kabbalists, that makes it quite literal and quite personal and something that you can't apply to anybody else. It's just you. The world was created for you, and you can't think of it in terms of another person. It's completely personal and your own. And even though I can think that way, that it's all me, you can think that it's all you, and we're not contradicting each other. How? How are we going to explore? We'll explore the meaning of it at length. To get there, I want to go on a bit of a journey of describing a completely, seemingly unrelated topic. The topic that is going to clarify this question is the next festival in the Jewish calendar. We have a festival coming up that I think it's fair to say is the strangest, most unexpected festival in the Jewish calendar. What am I talking about? The festival of Shavuot. Shavuot is coming up this Saturday night. And of all the festivals, it is the most bizarre in the way that we observe it. Reason being, because there's not all that much that you're supposed to do on Shavuot. every festival, every Jewish festival has its hallmark practice, its custom. On Hanukkah you light the candles. On Pesach you eat the matzah. And on Rosh Hashanah you blow the shofar. And on Yom Kippur you fast. And on Sukkot you sit in the sukkah and you shake the lulav. Each festival has its thing that encapsulates what it's all about. Its message, its practice, its mitzvah.
Cheesecake means nothing?
The festival of Shavuot, what is the mitzvah? What are you supposed to do on Shavuot?
Eat ice cream, could you?
Eat ice cream, cheesecake.
So you have to hear the Ten Commandments?
That's a Torah reading like all others,
Right.
but it's not. Doesn't say in the Torah to
Stay up all night.
right. So it was a pilgrimage festival, where like all the other festivals, you go up to the temple. But what's unique about Shavuot? What's the Shavuot thing?
We're on the same day.
So in temple times, there was a special offering, a special sacrifice, a bread offering, which was the new wheat of the season, correct? And without the temple today, nothing. And even with the temple, if you weren't in the temple, if you weren't there, nothing. It's a festival. And every festival you have to have festive meals, and dress nicely, but a unique observance that defines the festival, there actually isn't.
Maybe the uniqueness is that we weren't told how to do it. We were just given it to do.
Maybe, but that needs to explain what. There have been certain customs that have arisen around Shavuot, and the two most common ones are eating cheesecake or ice cream, milk, dairy products, blintzes, cheese blintzes. That's one part of it. And the other thing is to stay up during the night of Shavuot, studying Torah for the entire night, till dawn. Now these are not laws, these are not rules, they're not written in the Torah that you have to eat cheesecake or you have to stay up at night. These are customs that have arisen throughout the Jewish communities. But there's no actual hallmark mitzvah that makes Shavuot unique. And so you could, theoretically, keep Shavuot by having a nice meal, a festive day, and not doing anything particularly unusual that you didn't do on every other festival, any other holy day. The reason why this seems so strange is because what is Shavuot? What is it commemorating? What is the day of Shavuot? It's the day that the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. Were spoken to by God, the greatest revelation, the most powerful revelation that ever happened in history. An entire nation of men, women and children being spoken to directly by God. A major event. In fact, that would be the major festival of all, you would expect. This is the one that starts all the other festivals. We only have the other festivals because the Torah was given to us on Shavuot. So this should be the festival of festivals, the biggest of the big, the holiest of the holy, the one that everybody knows about, everybody does, and it's full of symbolism and practices, and you'd think that a big deal should be made out of this festival, out of all the festivals. I mean, we only left Egypt in order to go to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. So even Pesach, the festival of the liberation from Egypt, is just a preliminary, prelude, a step towards going to Mount Sinai. So Pesach should be a nice festival, but Shavuot should be the main event. But it's the other way around. Pesach is full of commemoration. We know exactly what we need to do. Shavuot is quite sparse. And the things that we do, we eat cheesecake. The most memorable thing is that you eat blintzes and ice cream. That's the way you celebrate a revelation from God. That's the way the holiest moment in history is celebrated, by tucking in to what could be described as quite a gluttonous, indulgent food. Cheesecake is not, some people are surprised to hear this, cheesecake is not a dietary necessity. It is quite possible to have a very well-balanced and healthy diet without eating cheesecake ever, or blintzes, or even ice cream. It's not It's not something that is necessary for life, and there are plenty of happy people there without cheesecake. It is a complete luxury to eat cheesecake. It's pleasure, but it's not something that is at all a bodily necessity. It's an indulgence. And you should indulge in such a pleasure to celebrate what? The holiest, most spiritual, most elevated day in the calendar, the day that God spoke to the Jewish people. That's the way you observe it. It seems like a very unusual way of celebrating a festival. We'll understand why we do that, why cheesecake and ice cream is the way to celebrate the revelation of Mount Sinai, by looking into the other custom that I mentioned, and that is the staying up at night. The custom is that on the first night of Shavuot, this year it's this Saturday night, to stay up the entire night awake, studying Torah. For the entire night, till the morning, till dawn. What is the origin of this custom? Where did this come from? So that it came from a historical story. And that is that at the original time at Mount Sinai, when the Jewish people were to receive the Torah, the appointment with God that they had was an early morning appointment. First thing in the morning, they were to stand at the foot of the mountain, and God would speak to the people to reveal His message to the world. And the Midrash, which is the oral tradition of Judaism that tells a lot of the stories that the written Torah does not tell, says that on the morning of the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people had slept in. They were asleep, to the point where they had to be woken up by God. So some of the noises at Mount Sinai was actually a divine alarm clock to wake up the Jewish people because they were late for their appointment. First thing in the morning, they were supposed to be up and ready at Mount Sinai, and they were sleeping. And the Midrash does say that it's a nice time of year to sleep in the Northern Hemisphere, that at this time the nights are pleasant and it's easier to sleep. They slept. And so they had to be awoken in order to make it to Mount Sinai. So the Zohar says that in order to correct this massive mistake that the Jewish people made in sleeping, we need to correct what they did. So we stay up all night. Every year we stay awake all night, all the way till dawn, in order that we should correct the mistake of sleeping that the Jewish people did those thousands of years ago. That's why we stay up at night on Shavuot. Now this story begs further investigation. Let me ask you, if you had an appointment with God, if you were told God needs to speak to you, and it's going to be early in the morning, and you've got some time to prepare. They were given actually 7 weeks' notice. When they left Egypt, they were told in 7 weeks' time, the next day, God is going to speak to you. That was the warning they got. So if you were given that amount of notice, you're going to have to meet God. And let's say it's early in the morning. And let's say you're not a morning person. So you may have chosen a later appointment, but when God makes an appointment, you take whatever you can get. So it's an early morning appointment with God. Is there any chance you might miss that appointment? Is there the slightest possibility that you might sleep in that day? Is it possible to imagine such a thing?
They wouldn't sleep all 7 weeks.
That's right. If you know you're going to be face to face with God, you're going to prepare. You're going to make sure that morning you're up. You're going to get good naps in advance. You're going to prepare yourself in every possible way. You're going to have 20 different alarm clocks in case this one doesn't work, and that one, and this. You're going to get your friend to call. Even if you don't have time to wake up easily, and some people find it hard to get up early in the morning, but you'll make sure that morning you're up. And most likely you're not going to sleep all that much the night before. And you know how it is when you've really got a major thing that you're nervous and excited about. You usually wake up before the alarm. Because you know, and you're so scared you missed it. You wake up 3 hours before the alarm and say, did I miss it? You're worried that you missed it. and then you sleep a bit more, and you don't sleep in. That would be, forget about a meeting with God. A meeting with your boss, or a potential boss, or a good friend you haven't seen for a long time. Any important event, you're going to get up. And here they slept in.
A person, it's the whole.
And not only one person. Let's say it's possible that one person, okay, we've all done it sometimes, and we did have something important, and we prepared and we wanted to really, but we didn't make it and we slept in. We have all done that sometimes. But here we're not talking about an individual, we're talking about an entire nation of men, women and children. Now I thank God I'm blessed with children, and I couldn't sleep in if I wanted to.
Yep.
If one doesn't wake me up, then the other one does. That someone's going to wake us up. You have a whole nation there of people camping out. Not one baby cried. Not one person couldn't sleep and woke up and realized what time it was. Not one alarm clock worked out of the entire nation. And everybody, absolutely everyone was fast asleep. That's bizarre.
Does it mean spiritually asleep?
They were asleep. It just says they were asleep.
What time of the morning are we talking about? Maybe they're not saying...
First thing in the morning. No, it's well into daylight saving. That couldn't be the problem. For everyone to be sleeping. Also, we know that these people were not taking this lightly. They were counting the days until this meeting. When they were told you've got 7 weeks and then God's going to speak to you, they started counting the days, which is the source of our counting the days till today. We have the tradition to keep doing this, that we count every single day from Pesach until Shavuot. We count the days, called Sfirat HaOmer, counting the days. And so, if we still counted, imagine them counting, knowing that they were going to meet God in 7 weeks. So when you count up to an event, when you're excited about something happening, the closer it gets, the more the anticipation builds. The more excitement, the more focused you become. So when it's 7 weeks away, it's still a while. When it's 3 weeks away, you're getting more excited too. 3 days away, the excitement, the attention that you have towards this thing, the focus is so intense. So the night before, let's say they could sleep the night before, but they would be sleeping with such excitement. An entire nation all together, single-handed, single focus on this one thing. It doesn't make sense that everybody could fall asleep and sleep in, unless you say that there was something deliberate here. There must be some type of conspiracy. To have an entire nation sleeping in, there must be something behind it. It must be planned here. There must be an intention. So the Kabbalists say indeed there was. Let us not underestimate the spiritual status of this generation. These were the people who experienced the exodus from Egypt and were about to experience speaking face to face with God. They were not just a bunch of people who just slept in for no reason. If an entire nation slept in, it was for a reason. They had an understanding, they had an insight that made them decide deliberately to sleep in. In fact, they thought that the best possible preparation to receive a divine revelation will be to sleep. How so? The Kabbalists explain that sleep is not such a simple thing. Sleeping itself is a soul experience. What happens, the Zohar says, when we're asleep, is that our soul leaves our body. There is a remnant of soul in the body that keeps us alive. Our functions are still going to some extent in our body, but our consciousness rises up to a higher place. It's like the soul going back to its source to replenish its energy, which is why we feel re-energized when we wake up. And so, when the soul leaves the body in sleep, it's freed from the confines and limitations of the body. And so while we always have a soul, and our soul itself is far greater in its scope than our body, it's a spiritual entity, whereas our body is physical. But as long as we're awake, so our soul is limited to the confines of the body, and we only experience the limited experience of this world. So all I see when I'm awake is what is in front of me at the moment. All I hear is that which is within earshot. The only thing I can feel and experience is that which my 5 senses can grasp, can touch, hear and feel. That's why I'm awake, because my soul is encased in the body. As soon as I sleep, so sleep, the Talmud says, is a 60th of death. Meaning, it's a taste, a smidgen of death. Like death is the soul leaving the body, sleep is also the soul leaving the body. My soul leaves my body, and in that state, my soul is a bit freer now. It is not limited to the confines of the body. It's now open to the world of the spirit. Which is why, during our sleep, we're able to experience spiritual experiences that while we're awake may not be possible. Many people report that in their dreams, they've had spiritual experiences that in waking moments they couldn't possibly have. Some people have had premonitions in dreams that have come true, like a prophecy almost, where they dreamt something would happen and it happened. They dreamt somebody was going to come and visit from the other side of the world, no one was expecting them, and there they arrived, they walked in. Or they dreamt some calamity might happen and they warned someone about it, and it actually was going to happen. They averted a calamity. People who, during their waking hours, don't have these visions and premonitions, but when they're asleep, their soul is free from the limitations of the mind and the body, and their soul could see future events. The Zohar describes it, that when you're asleep and your soul leaves you, you can bump into all types of angels. And some angels are angels that come and warn you about an event that's going to happen. On the other hand, the Zohar says, you might bump into a mischievous angel who tells you something just to confuse you or to scare you. And it may not be real. So not every prediction that comes in our dream will come into reality. But sometimes it does. You can have a spiritual vision in your dream that you wouldn't have had normally in your waking moments. Another very common thing is meeting up with a soul, of a departed soul, in a dream, where a loved one that has passed away either recently or many years ago, and in dream state you see them, you meet them. So again, the Kabbalists say this is a significant thing. Your soul is now free to meet those souls who are disembodied, because your soul is disembodied. You're free to meet them. And so these should be taken seriously, say the Kabbalists. If you meet a dead person in your dream, so pay attention. Listen to what they have to say if they say something. Or take in their facial features, their expression, the mood they seem to be in. Because they might be trying to tell you something. Sometimes they're just visiting, saying hello, and they want to just check in with you and tell you everything's fine with me. And so if you feel a very pleasant, peaceful, tranquil and happy mood coming from them, so then you know that everything's okay. But if they look troubled, upset, if something's missing, or they look like they're struggling and can't do something, they're being held back, so then maybe they're trying to tell you that there's something that needs to be done to help their soul. There are many stories, such stories of people who had such dreams, and it was discovered that the person hadn't been buried correctly. Their grave site had become desecrated. Somebody was not saying Kaddish in their memory or observing the anniversary of their passing, the Yortzeit. And so the message was that something needs to be done down here in this world to honor this soul, because they're stuck. And so therefore, if these things come up in a dream, it should be noticed, it should be taken seriously, because when you're awake, you don't meet these people. But when you're asleep, you can. It could be a real thing. Now, tonight's topic is not dreams. There are a lot of different types of dreams, and not all of them should be taken seriously. But the possibility exists that when your soul is outside of the limitations of the body, it can experience higher realities that when you're awake, you can't. Because while you're awake, your soul's experiences are filtered by the body, and you only notice bodily things. When the soul is out of the body, it's open to a whole new world, a higher world. Knowing this, with this information, we can understand a little bit better why somebody might think that sleeping would be a fantastic way to meet God. If you have an appointment with God, and you want to maximize that appointment, that experience, so what will be a better way to meet God? While I'm awake or while I'm asleep? If I'm awake, so I'm going to be limited in that experience by my body and what it can handle. Whereas in my sleep, I can have a direct revelation of God. Instead of that experience being filtered through my body, I can have a purely soulful experience, direct soul to God. So the plan that the Jewish people came up with was, after all this preparation, after all of this anticipation, that we finally got there to meet God, we want this meeting to be the highest, the realest, the deepest possible meeting that we can have. So let's shed our bodies and meet God as souls. Let's come to our appointment asleep. Makes a lot of sense. It was deliberate. That's why nobody woke up. There was no plan to wake up. They didn't want to. They didn't set their alarm clocks. They made sure they'd be asleep. They probably even made sure their babies would be asleep and not disturb them. I'd love to know how. So does that make sense?
There's a slight problem with it because you said that God woke them up, so he didn't want them to, he wasn't communicating with them while they were asleep.
Right. Obviously God didn't like it. He woke them up. Not only that, but we have to stay awake now. Every year because of that. Now, hang on a second. What was wrong? We have to stay awake to correct their mistake. What was their mistake? It was a brilliant plan.
Why don't we sleep?
We should sleep just like they did. What a great festival.
So they
A
just,
festival where you sleep.
Yeah. Well, no, cheesecake is better.
so they misinterpreted God's intention then, perhaps.
I guess so. There's obviously here some mistake. God was not happy.
Because
He woke them up. He said, no, this is not how we're meeting. And He woke them up for the meeting.
If you
And not only that, but we have to correct their mistake every year because it was a mistake. But where did they go wrong? Where was the flaw in their logic?
But if intention was like not to create us the way we are, then it would be just bodiless souls and just heaven and as is, and what's the point kind of thing. So if you wanted to talk to people, it meant to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meaning that the mistake they made was one that they can't be blamed for. Based on their understanding, it made a lot of sense. But it was not God's message. They were basing their whole approach on the normal way of looking at spirituality. And that is that if you want to get close to God, if you want to get close to truth, if you want to be true to your soul, the way to do that is by negating the body. The body, the physical body, is a blockage, a hindrance to soul. It's a limitation of the soul. And so therefore, the way to get to soul, to spirit, to a high reality, is by doing whatever you can to minimize and limit the body. So you want to go higher, go to sleep. That was their logic. Because sleep is where the body is switched off and the soul is set free. And that argument makes a lot of sense from the human perspective. From our point of view, that's right. From God's point of view, it's not. You see, from the human point of view, all spiritual paths have basically said the same thing. And that is this message. To get to God, negate the body. So, if you want to become more spiritual, you need to limit the food you eat, limit your bodily pleasure, certainly not be involved in sexuality, which is completely physical. Living a celibate life will allow you to reach the soul. Whereas enjoying the body, being involved in the body, being within the body is going to negate your spirituality. That's what all human created spiritual paths have said, in one way or another. That we're trying to get to a heavenly existence, to an out-of-body existence. And the body is merely a blockage to that. So the more we de-emphasize the body, weaken it, ignore it, or move away from the body, the more we come closer to the soul. That has been all spiritual paths. God was revealing a new path at Mount Sinai, a revolutionary path that no one could possibly have guessed. Because humans can figure out that this is what we think God wants. But no human can really know what God's intention is unless He tells us. So humans thought God created us, put us in this world so we could transcend it, get out of it. He put us in a body so we could go higher than it. We could elevate beyond the body. We can escape it. That's what humans assumed. God came along and said, actually, no, you got it wrong. My intention is that I put you in a body and in a physical world so that you should make the body and the physical world holy. You should invite me, God, down into your world. You should refine, transform, change the physicality of the world to make it spiritual. Not to escape it to reach spirituality, but to change it to make it spirituality. That's my intention. That's why I created the world. In order that the lowest place, the most physical place, the most distant place for spirituality should be turned around to being holy. That was my intention. Which is something we could not have guessed, because we're not God. It takes God to tell us what He meant, what He wanted. This is a totally different way of thinking, a way that the Jewish people at the time could not have guessed. So their assumption was, if I'm meeting God, better be sleeping. But what better way to experience it than being asleep? And they were right if it would have been a human endeavor. But this was about meeting God. And God had other plans. He says, I didn't create the world for you to leave it. I created the world for you to change it. I didn't put your soul in a body for you to escape the body. I put it into the body so you can change your body. Your human personality, your here and now being, the down here person. Or like we spoke about last week, that the arrows of the divine mission are not pointing upwards to heaven, or inwards to the soul, but they're pointing downwards into the world and outwards into the body. That God's mission is that this world, the physical world, should be turned around to become spiritual. And this whole new idea, revolutionary path, was introduced at Mount Sinai. Because we find that God did a very strange thing at Mount Sinai. He came down to the mountain and revealed Himself at the greatest revelation in history. And what did He say?
Wake up.
Don't steal. Keep Shabbos. Honor your parents. Hang on a minute. This is God talking. This is a revelation. Isn't He going to tell us something mystical? If God is coming down to speak to people, isn't He going to reveal some secret code to the universe or something like that? Like, isn't that what we're expecting God to say? You know, He told us to prepare for 7 weeks. for a meeting with him where he is going to reveal his secrets of the universe. So aren't we expecting something a little bit more lofty than, you have to treat your parents really well? Don't steal from each other. Doesn't he have something more profound to say than that? No. Because there's nothing more profound than that. There's nothing more profound than telling you that your mission is not to escape this world, but to make this world holy. And that means the way you interact with other people, the way you eat, the way you do business, your attitude to money and property, that has to be elevated and holy. Not escaping all these things, not forgetting about family and people and the material world, but imbuing it with holiness. That's my point. That's my mission. That's the purpose that I created you for. That was totally unexpected, which is not surprising coming from God. If we could predict what he was going to say, probably it's not coming from him. So the Jewish people were taken by surprise, not surprisingly, that God told them, my mission is not for you to be asleep, it's for you to be awake. You thought that you'll meet me by being asleep on a high level because your body will be left behind and your soul will be free. You thought that would be a higher revelation. That would have made sense, but that's not my purpose for you. I need you to be awake. I need you to be a soul in a body, because my mission for you is about bringing soul into body, into your physical self. And so therefore, being asleep is not the appropriate way to receive this. You have to be awake. A soul awake. So their mistake cannot be described as a sin now. We can't say that they slept in because they were lazy, because they weren't taking it seriously, they weren't preparing for themselves, they were just schluffing. We can't dismiss them as that. No, they had very holy intentions in sleeping. They wanted a higher experience. They wanted to maximize the revelation. But it was a mistake, because that was not the divine intent. It was a miscalculation. Not because of their evil, because of their purity, because of their good intentions. Just missed the mark. And so God had to wake them up and say, no, I need you souls in bodies, because that's my mission for you. And that mission statement is summarized in the one line that our sages teach us, and that is that God created the world because he wanted to dwell in the lowliest place. God wanted to dwell in the lowliest place. That's the catchword, that's the phrase, that's the line. That he wanted there to be a lowly place, meaning a place that is physical, that seems to contradict him, that seems to hide him and oppose godliness. He wanted an unholy world, that's what he created. And he wanted that he should be invited into that. We should bring him into that world. We should make that world holy. And that basically summarizes, from a mystical perspective, what all of Judaism is about. Everything Jewish is about bringing holiness into the physical world, which is what makes it such a revolution. Everything in Jewish practice is about doing an act with an object and making it holy. Whether that object be ourselves and our body, or the people around us, or food, or articles of clothing. There's every mitzvah, every commandment, everything involves something down here. It's never about escaping this world, it's always about bringing God into the world. It's always about refining the physical world. And so therefore, Jewish practice is not about soul devoid of body, it's always about body being infused with soul. The way the Kabbalists explain that is that if the lowest world is elevated, so then the entire structure is elevated. The only way to lift up all of existence is to start at the bottom. It's like if you want to pick up a pile of books, you have to pick up the bottom book and then the entire pile comes. If you go halfway down the pile, then the bottom won't stay. So too, by this world, this lowliest of all worlds being elevated, all worlds are elevated. All of existence, all of creation is elevated. You have to go to the very lowest of places and elevate the entire system. And we who live in this lowly world, who inhabit the lowly world, and who have lowly aspects to our own personality, we even grapple with evil within ourselves. We are at the bottom and have the power to lift up the entire system. That's why our souls were sent here, and that's our mission. So we have to be awake for that. So we correct the mistake, the miscalculation every year by being awake the entire night. Being souls in bodies. Yeah?
It's just a little, it might be nitpicky, but you just said about the books.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering if someone tried to lift it up from the middle and then put them to the side and had to go back and do it again, but they eventually got all the books to where they wanted it to go. It's inefficient, but it still does the job. So...
In the end, you have to lift the bottom up. To get them all, you have to lift the bottom up.
Right, okay.
It's the weakest thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So this introduces quite an interesting paradox. It means that our presence in the physical world is our mission. So what better way to celebrate this revolution, this revelation, than eating cheesecake? And blintzes. And ice cream. Now it actually makes perfect sense. Because where does the revolution touch most? Where does this revelation at Mount Sinai, who is it speaking to? It's speaking to cheesecake. The idea is not to transform the way you pray. It's to transform the way you eat cheesecake. The idea of the Mount Sinai revelation is not to make your soul closer to God, it's to make your cheesecake closer to God. That you should find God in the cheesecake. Meaning that in the very physical world, the very lowly world, that's where you have to bring godliness. If the revelation of Mount Sinai makes you better at praying, then it hasn't fulfilled its whole point. It's supposed to make you better at eating cheesecake. Meaning that you eat cheesecake differently. Before Mount Sinai, when you ate cheesecake, that was not a spiritual act. There was no spirituality in your blintzes. You might have had a spiritual life, which was your prayer, your meditation, your study. But your physical life, your eating, that's separate. That's nothing to do with spirituality. In fact, like we said, that is a hindrance to spirituality. The fact that we need to eat is a blockage to us coming closer to our soul. That's before Mount Sinai revolution. After Mount Sinai, no. Your eating has to be a spiritual act. You have to have an awareness of the spiritual power of eating. Every piece of food that you eat has a spark of godly energy in it, a divine energy in it, that is waiting to be released. Activate it. And how do you activate the divine energy in food? By eating it with the right intention. By recognizing the godliness in the food, which is why we make a blessing when we eat. By consuming it in order to have strength to further your mission in this world. To bring the physical world and make it a partner in your mission of goodness. You can't do good in the world if you don't have the power to do it. So bringing it in as a partner, that the cheesecake is a partner in your goodness, that is actually the revolution of Mount Sinai. It's much more about the cheesecake than about your praying. It's about your body, not your soul. And so what better way to celebrate this than by being as physical as possible in the most spiritual way possible. Eating cheesecake in order to celebrate a festival. One of the sages said that's why there's a tradition that any when we finish a section of Talmud, or when we complete a study, we always have food afterwards. Like at the end of prayers, you have Kiddush. Always at the end of something spiritual, you then go to physical. Why? It seems like the upside down way. How can you go from a prayer service to eating herring? Like, you just had a meditative session with God. Okay, let's go eat. Wait a bit, can't you hold on a little bit? You had something spiritual, you have to go to eat straight away. So the mystics say, no, you have to. Because we have to see if the prayers worked. You just had a spiritual experience, great. How does it change how you eat your herring? How has it transformed the way you eat now? The test to see that your spiritual experience has any meaning is that when you go to eat, you eat differently now. So it has to be brought down into the physical. Let's bring your spiritual experience into the physical. The same applies to the way we interact with other people. If somebody thinks that they've had a spiritual experience and that causes them to be less tolerant of other people, less patient with people, less loving with other people because now they're so holy that they don't have time for these unholy people, that's not a spiritual experience. They have not reached any godliness or holiness there. If you've had something spiritual, you should become more sensitized, more caring, more loving. It should affect your interaction with people. If you're closer to God, so then you should be closer to other people. It has to go that way, otherwise it didn't work. It all has to point downwards, bringing God into the world, bringing more unity and oneness in the world. That's the point of creation. And so eating cheesecake is the way to celebrate. With all this, with this idea, that this is our mission, this is our purpose, the whole reason we're put into the world is to bring godliness to the lowest of all places. The whole reason why God entered this entire massive enterprise of creating a universe was because he wanted to dwell in the lowliest place, the lowest place possible. With that we can understand what we started with, the statement of the Talmud that a person should say the world was created for me. Why? So the Hasidic and mystical interpretation is this. If God created the world because he wanted to dwell in the lowliest of all places, I can't think of a lower place that God would want to dwell than within me, where I am. Because I know myself, and I know how low I've gone. Anybody else I don't really know. I don't really know the soul of any other person, but myself I know. And I know that I've gone to pretty low depths, spiritually. I've been pretty low. But if God wants to dwell in the lowest of all places, if that's the reason for creation, he must have created the world for me. Because I don't know anyone lower than me. I don't know anyone who's reached as low as I have. And therefore, he must have created the world for me. I am at that point, that low point, that has the power to lift the entire structure of creation. Because I can only know my own failings. Anybody else's I can't. The Hasidic master said that even though most of us don't see ourselves as the lowest of all people, we can usually think of somebody lower without too much trouble. That's not the right way of thinking. Because anybody else's failings, we know other people have failings, but we don't know why. And we could definitely probably come up with extenuating circumstances, explanations and excuses to belittle and minimize their bad. So you know somebody who's really rotten. You can think of someone who's really rotten. But why are they so bad? Why are they so horrible? What brought them there? What circumstances were they put in to make them that way? What inner challenges were they given that you have no way of fathoming that brought them to that situation? This is not to excuse their wrong. They might still be wrong and evil. But what brought them there? What caused them to be there? That you don't know because you don't know their inner workings. You don't know their experience. And you don't know if you'd be in their circumstance, how much worse you might be. That you don't know. So somebody else's wrongdoing, you don't have to justify or excuse it, but you don't know why they're where they are. There might be good reason for it. You, on the other hand, looking at your own failings, you know that you're there and you shouldn't be there. You know that you've done things wrong that you should not have done. You have no excuse for yourself. For others, maybe they have excuse. You don't know. But you know. And so therefore, the sages said that we should always look, in spirituality, look up at everybody else. In material things, we can look down at everybody else. Meaning, in the material things, we say, you know what, I'm luckier than anybody else I know. I've got everything I need. And look at those who are less than you. But in spiritual things, look up and say, I'm at the bottom, because I know my failings. I can learn from everybody else. And so therefore, if God wanted a dwelling place in the lowest of all worlds, it's me he meant. He was talking about me, because I'm the lowest that I can possibly imagine. I can't imagine anyone lower, because I know my own failings. I don't know anybody else's. Meaning, this calculation of saying that I'm so low ends up giving you an amazingly uplifting message. And that is that God didn't create the world for holy people to do holy things. He created the world for unholy people to do holy things. His purpose in creation was not that angels should live angelically. His purpose was that humans, with all their failings, should lift themselves up and bring goodness into their world. The purpose of creation is much better fulfilled by a wicked person doing good, even than a good person doing good. Because that shows just how far goodness can reach. It can even reach that person. And so, ironically, God gets a kick out of seeing a person who's spiritually not all that high doing an act of beauty, an act of holiness. Much more than a holy person. When a holy person acts good and holy, there's nothing so surprising. What do you expect? When an average person, like me, does something holy, that's unbelievable. That's beautiful. That is bringing God into the lowliest of all worlds. So, funnily enough, who is it that has the power to fulfill the purpose of creation? For whom was the world created? For the person who is not all that great, but does great things. And remains not all that great. Is still not so holy, but does holy things. When an average person does a mitzvah, brings holiness into the world, that's the purpose of creation. And the most average person I can think of is me. So the world was created for me. Okay. Any questions? Statements? What do you think? Makes sense? Not really? Yeah.
I've read somewhere that where basically when there was a revelation when the sea was split, basically the vision that everyone had, right, was more than the most highest of people. So that's the kind of the vision that they had and the clarity. How could they not kind of get the real purpose then?
Okay.
Our purpose.
Indeed, the splitting of the sea, which happened a few weeks before Mount Sinai, it was a week after the Exodus, and a few weeks before, 6 weeks before Mount Sinai, was also a revelation. The idea of the splitting of the sea was not just that there was a sea in the way, but it was the splitting, the opening up of the hidden world, of the spiritual world. They had visions that even the greatest prophets didn't have. That's correct. But the message had not yet been conveyed. The message of God coming down to Mount Sinai and saying, I want you to invite me here into this world, that had not yet been said. So there were many people. Abraham also talked to God. He also had direct interaction with God. Moses saw the burning bush. There were other types of revelation before Mount Sinai. But this message, the idea that the purpose of creation is to bring God into the world, not to go upwards to a higher place, that had not yet been conveyed. And so experiencing the splitting of the sea, for example, would show you that they knew what truth was, they knew where God was. But their assumption was to get there, you have to go up. You have to go higher. And at that stage of history, it was true. What happened at Mount Sinai was God came down into the world and made it possible for this world to become holy. It wasn't possible beforehand. So a new thing was introduced at Mount Sinai. It wasn't known. It wasn't possible before. Answer your question?
What is the purpose when Hashem came down and gave the first two commandments? And that you must understand that the first two commandments were so powerful that the bodies were pushed, all 3 million of them, were pushed back, they died, pushed back 12 Ks, and the Shema stayed with Hashem.
Right, what the Medrash says, the Talmud says, is that when the voice of God spoke to the people, so the righteous amongst them were knocked over, fell over. The righteous ones. The average ones fainted and lost consciousness. And the less righteous, meaning the more wicked ones, their soul actually left them, they died. And so God had to revive them because he had to tell them another commandment. Which is like, again, like, what are you doing? Like, but it's reinforcing the same thing. You've got to be in your body to experience this. And even though those people may not have really been fully yet ready for such a revelation, but God had to make this revelation, he had to bring it into the world, to introduce to the world that I want my message to be in you, in your body, when you're awake. And so he did it again and again. And we know that that generation wasn't really ready for this revelation because they ended up worshipping a golden calf a few weeks later. We know they weren't ready. But the idea was to introduce this new concept to the world, and the rest of history is about making it a reality, making this world a godly place.
So any success since that time, would you say?
So definitely we've come a long way. We've come a long way because there's the accumulated work of all the generations since Mount Sinai has definitely made godliness and spirituality much more normal. Today, the world we live in, the most normal thing for a person to do is to say, I need to bring more godliness into my life. It's a totally normal thing. It's not weird, it's not bizarre, it's not someone doing something strange. It's become normal. And that's what it means. God being at home in this world means it should be normal. It should be normal to talk about God. And it is totally normal.
I don't think it's so normal. I think they talk about the universe and spirituality a lot, but I'm not sure.
That's people who have nothing to do with religion. Even they speak the terminology of religion.
Right.
Okay, they have different vocabulary because they haven't made that crossover yet, but the idea is totally normal.
And what do you think's in it for God? Why does he feel the need to come down here and dwell in this lowly place?
So the question, what's in it for God, is something that only he could explain, and we can't. But certainly, it's not a need. He couldn't need it, because a need means a lack. You can only need something if you're lacking something. And God is not lacking anything because he's God. It's a want. It's a desire. It's something he wanted to do. And a want can't be questioned. You can't ask, why do you want this? I do. There's not a reason for it. Then there's a lack. It's something deeper than a reason. And we've explained this in other classes, doesn't belittle our existence, that we're just a fancy of God. It's God's want, so that's infinite. But also, if we were just a need, if our existence was to fill a need for God, so that once the need is fulfilled, our purpose is done, we're gone. We're not needed anymore. But this is something God wanted. Because it's something God wanted, so that means that he actually wants us. He wants us to exist. So that means it's not that we fill our purpose and then we're not needed anymore. God wants us. He wants a relationship with us.
To some extent, though, that makes it makes this sort of relationship even more vulnerable because he wants it, we're not doing it. Therefore, he might at that point say, okay, it's not really working for me anymore.
No, if he wants it, then it's going to happen. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. And we're going to do it. So it's not that, well, he wanted it, didn't work out, so we'll have to try another universe. You know, it's that no, he wants it, it's going to have to happen, and we're going to do it. We will do it.
That's the whole discussion of free will.
Yeah.
Doesn't it take you back to exactly the first lecture? The first question of what is the purpose? And what is the purpose? Is there any purpose?
Yeah.
A few weeks later, basically going from full circle. This is the purpose.
Yeah.
Because God created the earth. He had to live
That's right.
for the purpose. So he told us this is the purpose.
Right. So our purpose, though, the thing that we can do, that no one else can do, no animal can do, is bring godliness into the world.
But you're sort of not saying...
So Bishvili Nivra Olam, that the world was created for me, means that I have to see it, that I'm at that bottom point in the universe. Lower than animals. Because animals haven't done anything wrong. But I have.
They're not wrong, they know what their purpose is.
I understand. So they're fine. I'm the one at the bottom of the rung, and I have to elevate the entire
It's
structure.
a contradiction, because without that, what does it mean? It's not. You're sort of saying...
The purpose of the world is for me. I am the purpose of creation. Why? Because God wants to dwell in the lowliest place, and that's where I am. Yeah? So I have the opportunity, in my loneliness, to fulfill the entire divine plan. Good to know.
There's a purpose.
Yes.
You know, you said that we've come a long way since Sinai and more goodness in the world and so on. But if this generation is probably the least sort of observant of all the laws, how does one then make that conclusion? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is that saying that we're doing good even though we're not following all the laws?
Yeah. But there's two concurrent ideas. One of them is that there's a descent of generations. Every generation is lower than the one before it. The Mount Sinai generation, who directly experienced God, were, the highest, and every generation further away from that is further away from that high point. And we, in this generation, are spiritually poor and distant and disconnected. And therefore, like I said, observance of the commandments is at a weak point, not a strong point. That's on one hand. But on the other hand, there's an idea that the descent of generation means that the world, the challenges, the spiritual challenges of the world are getting stronger, which means that the souls that are being sent down to face those challenges are also stronger and more powerful. And therefore, what seems like a small amount of observance is actually more powerful than a large amount of observance from a previous generation. Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Lurie explained this like this. He says that he was in the 1500s when observance was probably stronger than it is today, but there was also weakness in certain areas. And he said that a mitzvah that is done today, one mitzvah, is much stronger than a lifetime of mitzvahs that were done in the times of the temple.
Is that saying it gets harder to do the mitzvahs?
It gets harder to do, and so therefore they count more that the light that is generated through one mitzvah is so powerful, more than the light generated by a lifetime of mitzvahs in previous times, because it was easier then. And so therefore today, when you say that observance is weak, that's true. But when you have people, Jewish people, who are completely unobservant, but suddenly one day a year they just are totally Jewish. Whether it be Pesach, or Yom Kippur, or Hanukkah, or whatever their day is, that, the light and energy generated by that day is so powerful, it's so dramatic, because looking at it from the project, God's project perspective, He wants His presence in the lowliest place. So somebody who's, on the one hand, seemingly so distant from godliness, and that person still is connected, that fulfills a divine purpose. It's not an excuse for less observance, but it's saying that to judge a generation or an individual based on comparing them to other people, other generations, that doesn't work that way. It's what's that person's mitzvah.
But if you've got a person who is sort of very disciplined and it's easy to keep all the mitzvot, does that count less than, say, somebody who's not so disciplined and it's a real challenge?
Again, you can't really compare one person to another.
Right.
But definitely, the more you challenge yourself and break yourself, the greater the energy, the divine energy that's created.
Yeah.
And so therefore, to say that one person is better than another, because they do so much and this person does so little, how do you know? Because if it's easy for them, and the small thing they do is not easy for them, so they're not. But each person has to challenge themselves. And so what it really means is, for some people, it might be very easy to do acts of kindness and love. They're very generous to other people, but to be disciplined and to have a disciplined life where you do the right thing and don't go over borders, that's not so easy. So that's what you need to work on. Some people the other way, they're very disciplined, but they're not all that giving. And whatever your particular challenge is, that's where you have to be stretching yourself, and that's what creates more divine energy. Because every time you put yourself aside, the divine light comes in place of the self, and that generates divine energy. Okay, let's stop there.